So we have made it to Mission Impossible 3, which is actually the feature film debut of J.J. Abrams, the guy who directed Star Wars The Force Awakens and Star Trek Into Darkness and Super 8. This was his first film for a while, and to this day, if you were to ask me, Brett, what do you consider to be a very underappreciated film? I'd have a list that I would go through and tell you. I am certain that one of the first ones that I would mention is Mission Impossible 3. And in just a second, I'll get into the reasons why I think it's such an underrated film. But this film shows a very different stage of Ethan Hunt's life. He now has a fiancée and wants to leave his life with IMF behind. But after a tragic event, Ethan is called back to the agency to stop a mysterious item codenamed the Rabbit's Foot from falling into the wrong hands. So like I said in my Mission Impossible 2 review, I was not a fan of the direction that film went. It was weird for the franchise. It was something different, and I respect that it's different, that they tried something new. Did not work. And this series just needed, if it had any hope of continuing, it needed something to bring it back to roots, so to speak. And this film did that marvelously. One of the things that I really appreciate about it, and I actually noticed with this rewatch, is that it is very much so a standalone sequel. It doesn't follow any of the plot threads from Mission Impossible 2, which is already a plus right there. But you don't even have to watch, say, the first one to appreciate or just enjoy this film or understand what's happening. Seriously, if there was no Mission Impossible 2, and this was just a sequel that came out 10 years after the original, because the original came out in 1996, and then this one came out in 2006, like a revival 10 years later, I wouldn't feel that anything was missing. More of these recent films, they get more complex, and they start developing these in-depth connections between each other, even with these original 3 films, and that's fine. But what I really like about this film is that it's a very contained journey, a very contained story arc for Ethan. Very compelling. It's him trying to find a regular way of life. And in the opening, you see how his life would be if he just was a regular family guy and he just had parties and just spent time with his wife. And you watch that and it really fits. It really fits for this character that, you know, coming off of that original film, has a lot of baggage, and now he can just have a sense of normalcy. Mission Impossible 3 is honestly the darkest of the franchise, and it establishes that very early on, where you get this rescue mission, and this person that they're rescuing has an explosive implanted in their head, and they die. Which, by the way, that death was handled really well. Which I can see how a lot of other action directors would have handled that scene, where it's like, do we have time to save her? No, we don't, and, you know, this explosive is gonna kill us all, and, you know, they eventually have to throw her off the helicopter or something, and then it cuts to a wide and showing the helicopter, and then you just see this explosion at the bottom of the frame. But what I like about it is that it doesn't go for that type of spectacle. It goes for something really simple, where when Carrie Russell dies, she just has this jolt and her eyeball moves sideways, and it's this disturbing image that lingers with Ethan, and it stays in your mind as well. But what stayed with me even more is the scene that actually follows this, where going back to Ethan wanting to find a life without any secrets, where you see Ethan coming home to his fiancée Julia, having just seen this person that he's cared about die in this horrific fashion in front of him, just not being able to say anything about it, because it's IMF, it's classified. They even have to lie about the way that she died. They have to say that she died in a car accident and not that she died a hero. This emotional weight that he has on his shoulders, but he just has to keep a lid on it. So this film is not just the generic arc of the aging hero who doesn't want to do his job anymore. We're actually getting substance as to why Ethan doesn't want to be part of IMF anymore. And what just helps even more is that you get these really great performances from both Tom Cruise and Michelle Monaghan. They're not a movie couple that has an extreme amount of chemistry. They don't have so much time together in the movie. But through these performances, that you just believe that these people are in pain. You begin to accept this romance on a very visual level. All this is why when people are saying that Mission Impossible 3 is a good movie, but it's just an action movie or one of the weakest of the Mission Impossible films, I disagree. I saw this film for the first time when I was like 13 or 14. I loved it then. I still love it to this day. Speaking of that action, incredible. One thing that I like is that it starts sooner, which is great. In Mission Impossible 2, it started way late. And the action of this film is very frenetic. And J.J. Abrams is a really great director at handling these sequences where easily it could be scenes that move too fast and it almost becomes headache-inducing because so much is happening and there's shaky cam and all this stuff that usually plagues a lot of action films. But he really avoids that. And he manages to have it feel tense and very quick, visceral, but very well shot at the same time. And what's also great about this action is that the tension just seems to keep stacking on top of itself, where you'll have an action sequence, but there's like 2 or 3 things to worry about in that sequence. Where, for example, in the opening, you have them trying to escape this building. This helicopter is following them. The people over there have opened fire on them. But at the same time, you have Ethan discover the head explosive inside Kerry Russell. At certain points, this film is very much action sequence after action sequence, which usually is a criticism. But these scenes are tied by emotion. It is a very character-driven film, character-driven plot. Even to the point where this mysterious rabbit's foot that no one knows what it is. You have a scene with Benji, which, by the way, we get the introduction of Benji in this film, played by Simon Pegg. I love that guy so much, and I honestly forgot, like rewatching this film, I forgot he was actually introduced in Mission Impossible 3, but I loved it. It was funny, and he's theorizing that it's basically this apocalypse thing, and like Armageddon, the end of days, and everything. But you never actually find out what this thing is. But I didn't really care either. It's just this thing that I guess is going to be left open unless one of these other films just kind of step in for a moment and they give us that fan service of explaining what it is. But I didn't feel like it was something missing from the story. I didn't feel like it was a plot hole because this film, more so than the first two, was really driven by Ethan Hunt's journey, his emotions, his fears. And as I said, this film is the darkest film of the Mission Impossible series, and that darkness is matched by our villain, played by the late, great Philip Seymour Hoffman, who plays this guy called Owen Davian. And this guy has a very intense opening scene. And that opening gives you no context as to what is this rabbit's foot, what's happening, who's this woman that Ethan is talking to, why is this scene so significant? And then the film just kind of builds up to it throughout the rest of the runtime. And it keeps this looming threat, this looming sense of doom around our villain. Because the whole time we're seeing him, we know where things are going to end up. And we're just waiting for things to go sideways. And Philip Seymour Hoffman is able to do this great range of emotion where he can be a very calm, stoic villain, but also have moments of intensity where he lashes out. And this is a very disgusting character that it's this guy that doesn't care about people, and he's toying with Ethan, telling him that killing Kerry Russell's character was fun, and a villain that you're not supposed to sympathize with. You're designed to hate this guy and just want to see him taken down in a brutal fashion, which he does. He gets hit by a car, and that was satisfying. And that guy being the head of Ethan's problems throughout the film, that was just a perfect fit for this story. But with this film being of a more darker tone, this film still manages to be kind of a return of that classic Mission Impossible feel, where you get the return of the great tech. Ethan has to trick this security camera by taking a picture of what it's looking at and placing that on a flap over the lens so that it's constantly seeing a certain image while he climbs over this wall. That was so awesome. The voice generation scene where he holds Owen Davian at gunpoint and forces him to read this paragraph so that he can steal his voice. That was such a great scene. And the fact that it manages to get just a bit of tension out of the fact that some guy walks in on Ethan as he's dressed as Owen, but the voice is not generated yet, and he has to keep this guy waiting for a second until he can actually say something in this voice. And even when you get to a scene, which is just classic spy espionage stuff, where it's lip reading, where it's established early on that Ethan is able to read people's lips. And watching it recently, I think, did that really go anywhere? Oh man, such a cool scene. And then of course you have the other characters of this film, like I mentioned, Benji. That was such a great introduction to this character. But then also you get Lawrence Fishburne in this movie, who is very antagonistic for a while. He's one of the important people of IMF, and he's often criticizing what these other agents are doing. And he just has some great lines in this film, which Lawrence Fishburne is just one of those actors that he just manages to get thrown into some of the best scripts.
You can look at me with those judgmental, incriminating eyes all you want, but I bullshit you not. I will bleed on the flag to make sure the stripes stay red.
And then you have the character of Julia, which the only gripe I have about this film is that the romance marriage angle of this film, that storyline, at times it feels a bit rushed. At times I felt like there could have been a few more scenes between her and Ethan. Still, the film, it gives you enough with their characters to buy their romance. Their performances are great, but I'm not too annoyed by that because you get this badass scene at the end, her actually saving Ethan's life. Shooting two people, it just made up for the fact that we didn't get as many scenes as I would have hoped out of these characters, but it just further established their romance. And it was a thing that by the end of the movie, that's when I bought into their relationship. It's not just this thing of Ethan seeing her as like the embodiment of life without secrets and just normalcy, but that she actually reciprocates that and cares about him just as much. That was honestly a kind of a heartwarming scene, and Ethan's reaction at the end just was great.
You did that? Wow.
Very underrated film. You've seen the whole franchise, and this isn't one of your personal favorites. I get that, but at the end of the day, I've just seen so many other people's opinions, and I just think this film is way better than a lot of people are saying. If you've seen this film, but it's been a while, you have an excuse now that Dead Reckoning is coming out. But seriously, give this film another try. You might find a lot of stuff to appreciate. I'm going to give Mission Impossible 3 an A. So guys, stay tuned for my review of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol coming very soon. A movie that a lot of people agree is one of the best. Some people say it is the best. It's been years since I've seen it, and I only saw it once. Guys, if you like what you're seeing, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications of the other Mission Impossible reviews. If you have seen this film, what do you think about it? Do you agree that this is very much an overlooked movie? Whatever you guys think, comment below. Make sure to hit the like button, give me the support, and I'll see you guys next time.